Hello, Mr. Bajaj, and welcome to Budget with Business Standard.
Thank you.
So, how high are your expectations from this budget?
Budgets are always a process for providing a direction to the country for the coming year, a direction on the priorities of the government, focus areas, and also it's a budget. So it's also a hisab kitab of the government for the country. Now we know that our budgets in the last few years have been very high on reform, and especially through the pandemic when private sector has not been able to grow in the same manner and add to capital investment, we have seen the government play a very significant role with capex support that has come in from infrastructure growth, and this has played a very important role. uh, we have to keep in mind that India is showing a reasonable level of resilience, but we are still living in a world which is quite fragile. We are seeing slowdowns in major economy, and that is why we hope that the budget will continue to focus on significant public capex, so that we are able to ride through this cycle, uh, at least till when private sector is able to play its own part in investing and adding to the capex cycle.
So, you mentioned, the expectation is that government will again spend on capex, but isn't this budget coming at a time when big elections are due and 2024 election is just 1 year away? So, in some sense, this is the last full budget before election. So, do you think it's going to be a populist budget?
I believe that if you look at the actions of this government, even in past years, including in budgets pre earlier elections, the budgets have been balanced and have been focused on building the economy. And that is what we hope will happen this time as well.
So, you don't think there will be major spend on social sectors like health and education, etc., as is being projected?
I see such spends as going beyond mere populist measures. We are a country with a very large population. It's a population which needs to have access, whether it's to health, whether it's to education. Also, keep in mind that we are a economy where 60% of our GDP comes from consumption. So, the more prepared that we make our citizens, and health education play a very important role, we are actually helping priming up the economy. And keep in mind, those spends also done correctly help in generating new jobs. So to me, those become important elements of the budget, or can be important elements of the budget. I don't see them as mere populist measures.
So, CII has made some interesting recommendations already. You've made a presentation to the Finance Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitaraman. So, you've asked for employment also. Job generation is one of the demands that you've asked for. Then you've asked for reduction in taxes.
Let me broaden this out to say that from CI's perspective, there are a few clear asks from the budget that we have put forward in our pre-budget suggestions to the government. The first is that we have seen a period of fiscal expansion that was required to protect lives and livelihood through the pandemic. And we need to get back to some level of better fiscal management. And there are three suggestions over here that CI has actually made. The one is that in this year, the budget should adhere to the fiscal deficit target of 6.4% of GDP and move towards 6% for the next year, FY24, and thereafter 4.5% by 26, so that we get back into the direction of fiscal discipline over the next couple of years. It's also equally important for fiscal management to ensure that the government is able to augment its revenues. And that is where an aggressive focus on continued privatization is required. Our suggestion actually is that as line ministries identify businesses that can be privatized, why not then give the responsibility and authority for disinvestment to DPAM, so that they can then go ahead in a concerted manner and help with faster divestment of these assets. In addition, as part of our national monetization, asset monetization pipeline, the government should target higher asset monetization. So this will help get further revenues as well. And a third part that we've talked about for fiscal management is really to broaden the tax base. Now, our current tax to GDP is about 11.7%, and we think that we need to take this to at least 16% by rationalizing GST rates, because that's not a budget issue, that will be hopefully taken later, and reforming the tax administration so that the government earns more from tax as well. So the first large part of our recommendations is around this fiscal management. But let me come to a few other important areas as well. The second part of our suggestions goes around investment-led growth strategy. And over here, as we talk, the government has played a significant role in public capex in the last few years. We believe that, like last year, the budget should increase capex by 35%, taking it to rupees 10 lakh crore, and also focus a lot on rural infrastructure. This will not only create additional employment in rural areas, but it will also then boost rural demand in the coming years, which is very important for our domestic economy. So this is another important area. The third area that I would like to talk about, and which is very key for a country with 1.4 billion people, is generating jobs. This is something which is not only about meeting the aspirations of our citizens, of our youth, but it is equally about broad basing consumer demand. And if you look at so many of these initiatives that we are suggesting, just creates an ideal glide path, because these measures are not for a year or two. They have to be there for the next decade and more. And this is really India's decade, and that's what we are working towards.
Many ministers have referred to this animal spirit, and do you see the budget doing anything that will really, make the industry invest more?
I would say the government has already done a lot. By bringing the tax rates down, it has made it very attractive to invest in India. We are competitive globally now when it comes to these tax rates. The PLI schemes by themselves have provided direction on a whole set of industries. And so I believe that there is no single bullet. There is already a significant amount of action that the government has taken. But we have to also keep in mind that private sector looks at a certain minimum return on investment. We raise private capital, and we are responsible for that. So you will see sector by sector investments take place as capacities get used up. There is no single bullet that we want from the government. The government is already doing a lot. We just hope that the government continues with its own public capex investment, because that will handhold this economy through this period till the private sector brings their animal spirits back, as you say.
Do you agree that businesses are cautious?
Depending on sector by sector, if you look at, for example, real estate, if you look at housing, if you look at construction, these are growing significantly. If you look at financial services, credit growth in the last few quarters is already up. So there are sectors that have started, and if financial service sector is starting to give out more credit, it is to industry for additional investment. So I believe that this is a phase where, as long as the external environment stays reasonably balanced, you will start seeing private investment coming in the coming quarters.
That's a good thing to hear. And you've also spoken about 10% growth, 7 to 10% delta you've spoken about, and how to achieve 10% growth, and it'll be a new India, so to say. You've spoken about that. So do you think that we'll reach this 10% growth in the coming years? If so, by when?
We must reach this 10% growth. That's the opportunity that the world is providing to India. That's the responsibility that we have to our country, to our citizens. It is something that is a combined effort of government policies, practices that we have seen our government put in place very proactively and aggressively. It is about the Indian entrepreneurial dream, and we can see that with the entire startup culture. it is equally about large business in India and the way they are growing, they are expanding internationally. What we are seeing now in India is a new, confident, forward-looking India that is ready to take on the world on equal terms.
Realistically speaking, if you have to guess, what is budget going to give to the industry? What is that one thing that you're going to bet on?
Yeah, I think in such interviews, it's these one kind of things that people want to focus on. As I've already mentioned, in 6 areas, we've given a whole set of recommendations. There is no one silver bullet. The budget is not a single line item. It's a combination of multiple line items. And that's why the recommendations that we have made, I believe, are all very important to set the right stage for growth going forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bajaj, for speaking to us.
Thank you.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.